And we are live. Welcoming my next guest for episode 9 back in Adelaide. Played a bit of SANFL footy for Norwood, played a bit of SANFL footy for Woodville West Torrens, the Eagles. And then went back to the parade in 1988 as a technical and development officer. From there, did a bit of work with the SANFL in general manager game development before moving to, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Adelaide Footy Club for the recruiting manager role in 95.
95, yeah.
Yep. And then from there was poached to Western Bulldogs and then to Hawthorn. And obviously you've come back to Adelaide as the CEO of Norwood Footy Club. James Fantasia, welcome to Two Worlds Collide podcast.
Sam, what a pleasure to be here.
How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
That's good. Now, doing this podcast on a Saturday, we'll probably be releasing it on tomorrow night, so it'll be past tense. But how are the boys going? How are they looking at? How are they shaping up for today?
Yeah, tracking well. Yeah, we've had I put it down to the fact that I think we've had a terrific pre-season and the boys are very fit. Came into the start of the year with a real attitude to improve. So and we've seen that. So they're currently sitting top of the ladder, and I think 8 and 2.
Yeah.
But today will be a good test for the boys. Today we play against Adelaide, and they got a few boys back, and they've been in good form. So
yeah, how does it work with the rotation? Obviously, if the Adelaide AFL team is going well, that pushes a lot of AFL players back down to the team, so they can be really strong one week and then not so strong the next week if they have injuries up. So the flow-on effect, right? But are they looking good today?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one. I mean they've been pretty steady, Adelaide, I think, for the last few years anyway. I mean we most years one of those sides are usually playing finals footy. I think since the inception, Port Adelaide have been in the grand final 3 times, and Adelaide have certainly been in finals contention. So it's just hard to get a measure sometimes because you can play them and they've got injuries coming back. Doesn't matter where they're on the ladder, and you can end up playing against some pretty solid players keen to get back in form and get back into that league side. So yeah, look, if I think when you talk to our boys, they quite enjoy playing against them because it's another way to get a measure as to how they're tracking.
Yep. Yeah, and you also said that you're pretty fit from a good pre-season. Is there anything you changed this year from other years, or is it just everyone was more dedicated? Or
yeah, it's probably more the second part, Sam. I mean, and when you say the dedication, I mean we won a premiership the year before, and then the next game that we played, which is round 1, 7 players are out of that side. 2 have retired, but 5 are injured.
Yeah.
So they had late surgeries or just a mishap through the pre-season. So I never felt we had enough players on the track long enough to get ourselves to the level that we probably wanted to, and that we were found wanting in the first 2 or 3 games, and then after that we were in winning positions and just didn't get the job done. So that's another thing to look at. But I don't think we ever lost sight of the fact we had a solid group.
Yeah.
And and the competition itself's interesting because you just need 1 or 2 of those. Better say out of your top 10, if you lose 1 or 2, 3 of those players at any given time, you come back to the field pretty quickly. That's just the nature of the competition.
And how's the professionalism with the SANFL going at the moment? Are you finding it's getting more and more professional? Guys are dedicating more time towards it, and has Norwood been become a bit of a stepping club into the AFL for some players? There's a lot of players have been drafted out of there. Yeah, lately, is he trying to turn it into a bit of a football factory?
Yeah, there are a couple of good questions in there because I guess you don't necessarily set out with an objective. That's what you want to be, but what you try and do is in your process of trying to get better all the time. I think you do tend to attract some pretty good players, but more importantly, take it back a step. I think firstly, I find it extraordinary, to be honest, mate. The amount of effort and workload and commitment that's required to play at this level for what they get paid at SANFL level is extraordinary. And I take my hats off them. And I think part of that is, especially for a young person who sees that opportunity to progress, you're committed and you're committing to such time as you can't get to that level.
Yeah.
So I think that's a driver. but we get guys that stick around for a while as well, and I think they take pride in the competition and playing at that level.
Yeah. How hard do you because even I sort of know the amateur league level footy clubs and more money's getting shilled out there, and obviously there's a cap on that, but there is that big incentive for a player from like a good footy club like Norwood to go chase the money out at country or in the amateur league. Do you ever sort of find yourself trying to push blokes to stay around and not take them offers?
Well, I think what's happened is the cultural part and the I guess the way the game itself has evolved. If you look at the profile of what, say, an SANFL looked like 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, pre-AFL, then we had a lot of older players that would stick around for a long time because that was the best competition to be in, and the money was pretty reasonable. Now the commitment's high, the money's low, and you've just put out there's sometimes an opportunity to go out to country leagues or suburban leagues and get paid even more, and that does happen, absolutely. But what doesn't change is the motivation for a player who can see himself as an AFL footballer. So he doesn't give up his their opportunity to pursue that ultimate dream for money along the way. It's only when they get to a certain point, and so the profile has very much changed. If you look at every SANFL team, the average age is about 22, 23, where it may have been 24, 25, 26 back in the day. So I'm finding that, and to be frank, we don't tend to lose too many, to be honest, and it just makes way for the next one. Yeah, when it does happen, and I guess that's the part of the cycle. Yeah, and in terms of being a factory, I mean, we take great pride in trying to get boys drafted, girls drafted. We think that's a part of our program, and but we're there to win premierships. So I think part of that culture is when you want to be a good player, you got to learn how to win. You've got to learn how to lose, but you've got to be committed to a point where the wins take care of themselves. You know? So you're just so committed at it, and I think that's the culture you're trying to build and drive. And I'll finish off with the critical piece is there's two, but I think that one of the ingredients is having a good coaching and a good coaching platform. So, I'm very proud of the fact that we've got an outstanding coach on our table at the moment, on our books, and I think he's then attracted and educating some really good coaches underneath him. So I feel like our boys are really feeling like they're getting what is as close to an AFL program as you could get, just through his ability to provide, to drive that. The second part comes the clubs as a collective, how it supports those programs. Keeping in mind that you're running a business, it's a big business, and it's not just league team centric and focused. It has to have a balance around to survive and to keep on top off the ground as well.
It's funny that you say that because I'm a South supporter, have been ever since my dad sort of forced me into it and didn't give me an alternative to follow anyone else.
Sorry about that, mate.
That's right.
1964, you weren't born.
No, I wasn't. And then
Neither was I. Yeah, and it's the last time they won a premiership.
Yeah, Dad said maybe 78 or something. They played in one but lost it.
79, I think. Yeah. Against Port Adelaide.
Yeah. And I read stuff all the time that clubs like that are struggling financially and stuff like that, but I never ever hear that about Norwood Footy Club. Have you? Yeah. Is there something that you've done, to entice members back or to keep them around and to keep them active?
Yeah, look, definitely. But there's a couple of parts to that for me. It just makes me reflect a little bit too, because when I was at the Western Bulldogs, in essence, they were South Adelaide to a fair degree. They hadn't won a premiership, I think, since 54. I think it was, or something like that.
Well, when they won in
16.
it was 50 or 60 years or whatever since they won their first one.
And so coming into that environment, we had a pretty good group as well. I'll be honest, I fell in love with the club itself. I fell in love with the culture and the people. The fact that a Western Bulldogs supporter their last $20, they're going to go and buy a scarf.
Yeah.
Their support was extraordinary.
Dedicated to the cause.
Yeah, and I just loved I love what that meant. So yeah, and to be honest, then I can reflect that against the Norwood that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And I felt there was lots of similarities, and Norwood isn't necessarily a low socioeconomic area. It may have been in its day, by the way. People forget about that.
Yeah.
But it's certainly it's more middle class now, whereas Western Bulldogs is probably lower socioeconomic, and it's developing into a more middle class.
Yeah.
And so the struggle with that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed the way that people rally. And footy clubs ultimately, we're all pack animals, that's how it works. And footy clubs are a place to belong and to it's hard to really explain it, isn't it? Like how is it that you can grow up and someone influences you or you somehow find a colour, a club, that name, something that grabs you, and then you want to go to war for it.
Yeah. Yep.
It's fascinating, and I love that. And I love that people can be passionate enough and respectful enough too to enjoy that passion, but not get overs. So not get to the point like in the EPL where crowds go there to
and they form gangs and stuff like that.
That's the excessive part. But I love the passion part. I love that. And for that, I've even searched out some of that stuff over my journey travelling. I'd go and I've been to 3, 4, 5 Millwall games because I just wanted to get a sense of what that's like. I see it in some clubs, and I'm love to try and find how do you piece all that together to drive that in a really healthy, positive way.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
I recently had Tom Jonas on my podcast, episode 3, and we spoke about how Port, went from that 2011 to 2012, and then in 13, 14, 15, they turned into this dominant force. And we spoke about that song that they play, Never Tear Us Apart, and it really, and then how they did it at the start of every home game. It really brought a sense of belonging to their supporters. Like, this is our thing now, and we're the first to have it in the AFL. It was quite brilliant.
Oh, it's outstanding, and Tom, he's had a brilliant ride through all of that. He came in as a rookie in a tough time, developed with that group, and then became a leader in it. So it's extraordinary.
I asked him a great question about what sort of changed from that 2011, 2012 factor, and how did the club turn around? And he said one of the biggest points was Travis Boak taking a stand, and Geelong threw the kitchen sink at him, but he goes, no, I'm going to stay at Adelaide. I'm going to stay with this team. And he said it sort of brought in it brought the team together a bit. And then from there they got David Koch, and then the coach came in, and it just everything turned from that point.
Do you want me to give you my little insight into that?
Yep.
So we're playing against Port Adelaide. There's probably a little backdrop to that, but I don't know how much longer, we don't diverge too far, but there's a little backdrop to this. So when that young man passed away in Vegas, our group were there.
Yep.
And they were the ones that jumped right in, and because they just arrived, we had our chaperone was a police guy that deals in all this stuff. He wouldn't believe it. He would have been sent over from Victoria had he not even been there. So, and so they took, there was a lot of comfort in that. Fast forward, we're now playing Port Adelaide in London in an exhibition game at the Oval. I've got to think about this for a minute because I might start choking up because, guys, seriously, I think I saw something that day that was remarkable. The way that so this is after he's passed away. They had a group of people, including his girlfriend, that were going to go after this trip, the exhibition game. They were going to go on holiday together. They're a very tight group. And so they decided to bring her still to that trip.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise, but I'll finish this off with the fact that when I was walking out around the ground and I saw this young lady just in tears and they've been comforted, and this all came together. But just prior to this, we are smacking them.
Yeah.
We are half-time. We're just, I can't remember the scores, but
up by 10 goals, something like that.
Yeah, maybe 7 or 8. And it's comfortable and easy, and we're doing all right. Mate, they rallied. And they ended up beating us by, I think, a point or 2 points, 3 points. And I just had a sense of this was about, young McCartney and
Yeah.
and the rallying, and when something happens really traumatic in a group, the ability sometimes it's about how the group can deal with it. I think it can galvanise a group, and I honestly saw get them galvanising.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And
no, 100%.
And it was from a distance, and
Yeah.
and then we got to celebrate with them that night as well. We all went together out for dinner and had some things happening, but yeah, it just struck me, and for me there was no coincidence that they just from there started to believe and
gel
and do it for each other, and they're only little things, but to me that was part of that.
Yeah, very interesting. You bring that up with that dude that unfortunately died. On my trip to Afghanistan, we lost a couple of guys as well, and we were out the next day and making sure we were mentally still doing the job and stuff like that. But it also forged us closer together.
Sure.
Through that loss and stuff like that, and one of the guys I had on a couple of episodes was there the night that we lost the 3 guys, and those people there and me and him, like, we have a bond that no one else can have.
Yeah,
because we've been through an experience together and stuff like that. So it's probably very, very similar to that type of thing, and that team turned around and they galvanised together and bonded together, and it made them closer.
So it's unfortunate, and that sometimes is that those really traumatic things happen for us to get that level, but it can happen. There's no doubt.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Look, I'm going to jump on to just some questions for you now.
Sure.
To make my podcast flow well together, the previous guy has a question for the next podcast guest, and Gabe, we're talking about him before. He went in for a routine bicep tendon repair surgery and woke up 20 days later with an arm missing. Incredible story, and it really sort of made you sit back. Like, he didn't sit here and complain. He didn't want to feel people to feel sorry for him. There was just none of that. He was just, and to have that type of attitude going forward, it was just brilliant, quite inspiring. So, if anyone wants to go back and listen to his last episode, so it was absolutely brilliant. But his question for you is, given your senior positions at AFL clubs, were you always a dominant leader growing up? And if so, did you carry that leadership mentality through to your roles at football clubs?
Well, I think by nature I was a bit of a bully. No, that's not true. There's times I was a bully, I'm sure, when I was a kid. But no, I if anything, I've always felt I was a little bit more of an independent thinker.
Lateral thinker, maybe?
A little bit laterally, but independent. I didn't always run with the pack and stuff. I had my own pack that I was want to run. And so in that respect, I think that's some type of indication that you've got some drive and leadership. And then the other thing for me too was, look, I've always probably been like captain or vice captain, and growing up, and always felt that some more in primary school, I felt like I was a bit more the leader of the pack, but when I went to high school, I used to get frustrated. I thought I should have been the leader of the pack and couldn't get a pack together. And didn't want to go with the other packs.
Yeah.
And but the truth was, for me, I think I belonged to a lot of packs, if that makes sense. So even racially, we're growing up, Italian and Australian.
Yeah.
I've got a foot in both camps, and so if there was blues on, I always knew both sides very well, and could even most of the occasions you could, probably get a timeout.
Yeah.
Stop a few things happening. Or
sounds exactly like your son. Exactly right? Like your son.
That's nice to hear. Yeah, so there's a bit of that, and then I think I just had blind ambition anyway. I just wanted to keep getting better as a person, growth. I've always had this view, without trying to sound too corny or poetic about it. I think I've wanted to be on what I would call a lifelong learning, and I don't ever think I've learnt enough yet. I don't think I've got the answers to anything yet. I still feel like I'm very much, and that, so probably that falls under curiosity, massive curiosity. Yeah. So that takes me across a lot of different things outside of footy, which has probably been a blessing for me in lots of ways as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also just want to jump on another question as well. And I was talking to your son about this. You almost had like you never really, when you were younger, like a refusal to take no for an answer. And it came into this story that your son told me that I want to know more about it. I'm really, really curious about it. So when you were younger, you arrived at a state training session.
Oh, yes.
And you weren't actually invited to it. But
No, I was actually quite pissed off, to be honest, that I hadn't been invited.
But you rocked up and said, well, I'm here now. I'll just train with you. Do you want to tell me about that story and sort of the attitude behind it as well?
Yeah, well, this is absolute gospel. Part of my motivation was to get a state tracksuit. That's all I wanted.
Just so you could wear it around.
Yeah. They were pretty cool. And I thought, that's a statement there. You can get one of them.
Yeah.
It means you're going okay.
Yep.
So that's a weird thing. But my brother had made the state team and I was playing footy. I was okay. I was playing pretty good footy and my mates around me were all going to this state trial and they were talking about it through the week or a couple of weeks before it. And the way that worked, you had to be nominated by your school to go. And I hadn't been nominated. So I thought, I found out the time and everything. So, yeah, I just rolled up and obviously then my name's not on the list and I didn't know what to expect, but I thought, I'm there, what can they do? I'll hopefully sneak a game in or something.
Yeah.
My name wasn't on the list and there was fortunately 2 or 3 others that were in the same boat.
Yeah.
So obviously the school hadn't got it through in time. They'd told them, but something had happened. So they just must have thought it was a bit of an error. And then the next minute, so I didn't get a game. That they were playing, you had to play, these 2 teams would play. And then they'd, so I got a half, that's right. I missed the first half and they put me on a back pocket. So I hardly even got a sniff. And then they'd call out, these boys, you don't have to come back next week. You're already going to go through.
Yeah.
And they'd read out a list of names and I wasn't on that. So I got to come back, but they had one more trial session. So the fact that now my name was on the list, I came back the next week and I was on the starting bench. I was on the starting lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just had a good game and
nice.
Got my name pushed to the next one and the next minute I made the team about a month later. And
you what was that, under 15, 16 or?
It was under 16 schoolboys and they had it. So I think South Australia was under 15 and a half.
Yeah.
Victoria were under 15. So they had it, and every other state was under 16.
Yeah, okay.
So, I played with Tony Hall and Dwayne Russell and some really good players there. Like we all grew up together. Peter Motley.
Yeah. I had my father-in-law here talking about the Till Cup side and
that year. So that my brother had made that side.
Yeah.
And mate, that's as good a under 18 or under 17 Till Cup side you will ever get.
Yeah, we heard it, like Kernahan, Bradley, Platten.
Yeah, Hughes. Most of those guys, Daryl Hart kept going, but they became the nucleus of the State of Origin team.
Yeah.
That we just had huge success and I ended up managing that side. So,
did you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
nice.
So that was quite interesting.
Your playing career probably cut short a little bit. So, when we're talking about you managing that footy side and stuff like that. Retiring from a young age of football to go into management of footy clubs, do you ever sort of regret not playing longer?
Yes and no. I mean, I was 24. I was teaching, and the opportunity came. Norwood Footy Club. I'd left Norwood and gone to the Woodville Warriors, and I just got a phone call from the club, and they just said, "Look, would you be interested in taking on this technical and development officer's role?" It was like being a glorified teacher in football, really. But the catch was I couldn't play.
Yeah, okay.
So I hummed and hawed about it. And Russell Ebert had just come into Woodville as the new coach, which ironically him and I became great mates later. And worked together in state footy together. And when he coached State of Origin, I was a footy manager for all those things, and we'd play tennis every Wednesday at Russell's place for years. Yeah. But he came and I just felt like I could play league footy. I was very confident about playing league footy. That was fine. But I wouldn't say I was a state level footballer. And I didn't I just felt there was perhaps this, and I didn't know why, in the back of my mind, there might be a really good opportunity here. I love footy, so to have that opportunity potentially to forge a career out of it just really excited me, not knowing, of course, that there was so many other layers to come.
Well, it probably seems like the right decision to, you're looking back on your career now with footy management, probably seems the right call at the time.
Well, absolutely it is, Sam. Yeah. I mean, I've done things and achieved things in footy, through footy, that I probably never would have had that opportunity in any other, field of work I could have ever done. So, look, I'm one of these people too, mate. I don't even regret is not even in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's not. I want to look forward. I want to learn. Have I had many mistakes? Way too many to talk about. But it doesn't define me. It doesn't. Those things don't define me. I don't think. What I think defines me is my continued evolution. That's what I kind of have my vision as to what I want to be.
Yeah, I think too many people look in the past and that trips them up for the future. Yeah, because they're not looking forward.
Yeah, and be proud of some of that, but don't get caught in it. If I ever, my biggest problem, mate, is I look too far forward.
Yeah.
I'm
on the horizon type guy.
Yeah, I'll take you when we take you down a little rabbit hole. So So for me, an example would be when I rolled up at the SANFL from Norwood. I rolled up with a computer, a 386 powered computer.
Yeah.
Mate, there was no computers even around. Like the secretaries or staff were with electric typewriters with the latest thing. And so I was when I was at uni, I didn't even learn computing, but a mate of mine was doing journalism, and they had access to back then the uni very very new the uni computing system and network, but teachers didn't, but journos did. So I got his password, and I would just start hacking into the mainframe and
outside the box thinker.
Yeah, and then I used to even attend a couple of lectures just to sneak in the back and try and understand a few things. And then I was doing my own stuff, trying to educate myself around that because I just had an interest in it. And then I started doing my assignments. I know it doesn't sound like much, but I was doing word processing. Well, my lecturers were getting it saying, "This is the first ever word processed document I've ever had."
Yeah.
So. And then one day I'm in Melbourne. Fast forward, I'm working for the SANFL. I'm in Melbourne. I'm at a conference. I look across the road through the window, and I see software from $4. Mate, could have knocked me over with a feather.
Yeah.
That was a problem back then. If you had computers, it was hard to get software. So, and if you got it, it was expensive. So I started thinking, okay, couldn't wait for lunch. Straight out of lunch, down into the shop, spoke to the bloke, quick fast story. I've ended up selling software out of Adelaide. Selling software. Excuse me. Yeah, and when I started...
An opportunist.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I had this little, mail order business selling software.
Yeah.
And then at the back I used to buy tube and make goalposts and sell them as well. So these little side businesses going. But so I've always been thinking like that. And that can get me into trouble too, because if I go down the rabbit hole right now, I talk about NFTs and I talk about how that can apply into footy.
Yeah.
With player cards and the utility they can bring. And imagine at some point in time, that'll convert to your membership being worth a fortune or a small fortune. So. But the world's not quite ready for that yet.
And I don't think it is.
No, but we're getting close.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah, we're getting close because ultimately NFT and cryptocurrency have given blockchain technology a bad name because that's all they'll tune out because that's all too complicated, too risky or whatever. But it's not that. It's the technology that I'm referring to that will effectively provide a whole new.
It's an open source platform, right? So
correct.
So everything can be verified by each and every person,
and it's impossible under that format to have
hacks or
contracts
doubles,
changed and so on and so forth. So so that's how I kind of digest things.
Yeah.
But then that reverted back to now I'm recruiting, and mate, I'm thinking of, I got a guy, one of my mates actually, to go and help me write the first ever recruiting program that the Crows ever had, and then there was a more collective one that was done through the AFL.
Yeah.
But so I was always working out those things and data mining and.
All right, so I want to get onto the Crows stuff now that you mentioned it. When you went for the job, were you the most experienced person they were looking at? And like, if you weren't the most experienced person they were looking at, how did you sort of stand out and get the job?
Well, I got asked to apply for it. I was the state development director at that stage, so I was running all the underage and all the footy for underage right throughout the state. And in that, to be honest, the Crows started in 91. By the time I went to the Crows in 95, that business had grown from $1 million business to like a $3 million business.
Yep.
And we got, I got a fantastic ride on that, being able to, develop a whole new game plan for the league and how to roll out footy across the state. Auskick was on the go, and we're doing a lot of things. So I think, and part of that role, believe it or not, was I took over I looked after all of the state programs. So effectively over that 5 years, I knew every state kid that was coming through from under 12s to 16s, 18s.
Yep. So you had that knowledge base.
Not just in South Australia, because I'm going to these carnivals and I'd go to national conferences, and my network was quite extensive at this stage, and knowledge base around the player pool. And then I started I was actually always doing work for the Crows, even from 91 when they started, but more helping the recruiting because I was already in that space. Don't tell the other clubs that. And then I
can edit that out. It's all right.
Okay. And then I became the recruiting manager in 95, with really, I think, on the back of the fact that I left one little piece out. I mentioned to you earlier, I was also the State of Origin team manager. I was the football manager for all those players, including the State of Origin. So not only did I have access or knowledge around all the best kids in this country, I was actually, having face-to-face, hands-on with the best South Australian footballers.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who they are. And
maybe enticing them to come home at one stage. Or
when I first started, I was with the league, and then I became the recruiting manager, and the league kept me on as the manager of the program, which the AFL clubs all got in arms about. But I kept the job and stayed there for another couple of years, and was it an unfair advantage? Absolutely. And did I try and leverage from that? Absolutely.
Well, you got to take it when it's there, right?
Yeah. Well, you don't get them all back.
Yeah.
But you do with some of them.
And talking about your scouting role and recruiting as well when you were at the Crows. When you're assessing players, I read this book recently by James Kerr called Legacy, and it's an absolutely brilliant book. It's about the New Zealand All Blacks and what sort of makes up their team and leaving the jersey in a better place and recruiting blokes in not only for talent to play for the All Blacks, but for character as well, because they were big on, you're playing for our country. So you got to be the right type of person playing for that country. And if you're not, then you have a little bit of time to change or you're out. Like we don't need you. And they've had one of the highest successful winning rates in any team ever. I think they're running a percentage of 78% win percentage, which is pretty unheard of for, that type of high level athletic field. But, how much did you look at recruiting for not only talent, but also character, ensuring that you're getting the right people to the footy club and not getting someone that, it doesn't matter I don't even think it really matters if they have baggage or not, but, if they're just not the right type of person or fit for the footy club, how important is it to recruit for character and not only talent?
Oh, I think it's massively important. And what can tend to happen at times, because of the nature of sport, it can be role specific. So you can get caught sometimes, where you're so desperate for that type of player, and he's already might have already had some great runs on the board, and that's where clubs get caught. They can compromise for the need versus the character, and but I think most professional sports these days have a very strong profiling around. I call it a 360 assessment. So it's got to be that. So back in my day, what I would do to try and get on top of that, and I kid you not, we would do with my team of recruiting staff, and I would do all of them, but I'd have different guys do different sections. I'd do 90 interviews a year in their home. So I do over 300 interviews a year.
All over Australia?
All over Australia.
Yeah.
It was my favourite part of the job.
Yeah.
Some days I'd drive in country Victoria and end up in someone meets you on a dirt road on a cross section, then we follow them into their farm. And like to meet their families, to have an insight, it just helps you get a better understanding of the individual.
Yeah.
So I think it became massively critical. One of the other thing that we did, I'll tell you two quick stories. One was I actually engaged a lady by the name of June Gameau, and June was a leading psychologist. Fantastic lady, and we did a 3-year assessment together, and that was to identify the characteristics of what makes an AFL player. Now, it sounds so simple, and it took 3 years, but we interviewed and surveyed, and she did a lot of this, third parties, internals, and I just remember we looked at the essences and the first, or the elements, and the first element that was clear, number one clear, was competitiveness.
Yeah.
Because what it does, that drives a whole lot of other things. If you talk about stubbornness, or one of the great quotes by John Kennedy is, failure cannot cope with perseverance. So it's this having that in you, that's the competitive. Then you start getting to breaking it down, and when you talk about something like a word professionalism, that has 7-8 connotations. It's how you present to yourself, to others. It's how you internalise and drive yourself. It's getting to work on time,
punctuality, stuff like that. Yeah, it's
got all of these other things, and so we was unpacking, and the reason was because these things are subjective. They're not. There's no objective measure. There's nothing that says, if I fill up or if I run A to B, that is a objective measure. That's what it is.
Yeah.
If we did it without a clock, it'd become a subjective measure, because you're guessing really. It's a good guess, but that's what you'd be doing. So with character, it's still built around a subjective measure. And what we would do, because we only get certain times, especially say you're at a draft camp where you're interviewing a heap of kids, and you would only have a certain time to interview. When you go out to their place, you've only got a certain time. So we would start to, through June, we would actually get the right questions to ask, open-ended enough to be able to elicit those, the responses we were trying to assess, if that makes sense. You can spend a lot of time just talking, and you can walk away and go, great bloke, and felt good. But have you really got to some of the key elements?
Who are they?
Who are they? Yes. And so you're looking for, examples and, some of their history sometimes. And or you're not trying to trip them up, but you can ask them questions that can get them to think on their feet, and then you can get a real insight into that. And then the other thing that happened was I got an invitation one year, because it's really hard to learn recruiting. I mean, there's no courses, or you've got to make it up as you go in a way, but there's some precedents around what you shouldn't do and should do. But the NFL's been doing it for a long time. So I had this unique opportunity to go to the NFL draft camp. And the thing I picked up, one of the things I picked up, they had spent so much time and effort in the psych testing. And that was really new ground. And of course they got, lots of resources. They can spend lots of money around doing these things. And we got the group that I was with, there was the guy from Sydney, West Coast, myself, and an AFL representative who got invited to the camp, and they basically gave us this pass that would get us in everything except for the psych.
Yeah.
Anyway, we tuned up the psych bloke, and before we knew it, we were able to sit in the back and started to watch some of that as well, and gave us a few of their tests. And Yeah, so I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
And that was, something I was really keen to start to pursue.
How much did NFL clubs worry about that psych stuff? Was that a huge part of it?
Massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drug testing became massive and psych testing became massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reasoning, because, and I left one out, which is probably the most important one. Their screening, health screening across the board. So that every person would do an MRI. They get their heart tested. They get this. Because apparently some time ago, number one draft pick, he's worth $20 million off the bat. 2 months later, found out he had a hole in his heart. Was stressing and some of the things, had these tests. Well, that should have been picked up well before that. And from then on, I think, they started putting enormous amounts into medical screening. Mm-hmm. And then I think the drug issue one was more about that was the thing of the day happening, and they would all get screened, but they really made a point of they didn't want to bring someone in who was already down a bad pathway. And then the third one, of course, was this psych stuff that they were well and truly more advanced than most others, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched a documentary about a guy on Netflix that was trying to get drafted trying to get drafted from college, and he was a big drinker, but they were trying to cover everything up. His agent was trying to cover everything up, and he was a really, really good college player, very good college player, but ended up getting drafted late second round and just didn't make it anywhere.
Yeah.
Because the NFL teams found out, and then instead of going from a top 10 draft, he went from a 50 or 60 pick, and nothing really accumulated from thereafter. But it's amazing how much research they do into drafting an asset, because it is a business, right?
Yeah, it's huge.
And you're drafting an asset to that business.
Yeah, look, I enjoyed every minute that I was there and got to meet some unbelievably good people and got a real insight into the industry. Yeah, that was wonderful. But I think across the board, you're always trying to find another way, and,
like a leg up on the competition.
Yeah, and I did some unbelievably ridiculous things, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
So I started researching. Anyway, what I tell you along these lines, I had every player go and get their photocopy of their hands, right? Because we're starting to measure the distances between their fingers. Because there's a study out there that tells you some indicators about the lineup of your fingers and the distance, and it's meant to profile. There was another one that we had because we were going to move into drafting or putting young 15-year-olds on a scholarship out of New South Wales. And the only one I know that ever worked with was Taylor Walker, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
He's still playing, which is incredible. But back then, so we were trying to assess maybe how tall you're going to be. So there's a study that was done that if you sit at 90 degrees with your knee and your knees at 90 degrees, sitting down, you could measure from the top of your head to the bottom of your spine, and then the length of your arm, the first part of your arm, and you'd be able to determine
how tall they're going to
be. And there was a study done around this, so we started to apply that and see if that had any. And then at this stage, we've now got about 10 years or maybe a bit longer, maybe 12 to 14 years of data from draft camps. So I got a guy from Sydney. He was a professor in Sydney. Remarkable man. Genius. And he incidentally made a fortune because in one of his PhD studies, he was able to determine the inner body temperature by measuring the waves in your...
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, he did that through data, and he can get it almost... Now, why that's so important is it's a very intrusive thing to do. And people that need long-term, big surgeries, they have to get their core body temperature. And if they're really ill, it's hard to drill in to get it. They've got it under their spine. And so something like this has just revolutionised that part.
Yeah.
And he was a driver in this. So anyway, I got him, and I said, look at all this data. Is there a way that we can start to piece this together and see if there is a pathway to determine future outcomes for certain results for people? And it was just playing with all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Did you ever see any results in that sort of stuff?
Yeah, we did. And even with June, I should add that we came up with a matrix in the end. And the first one we applied it to, there was a guy called Douglas.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
and we chose him that year. And look, he went on to become a club best and fairest and 200 game plus player. And I think now he's coaching up in the Gold Coast. And
yeah. He finished off at Norwood, didn't
he? Yeah, we got him back there as well for a little piece. Just a great football person, and a great having a footy environment. Just outstanding.
Real good for culture.
Yeah. And the way that he goes about his business, and that was all coming back to character.
Yeah.
And it was really utilising. He already had a high level footy, but the character part, when we had to compare him, Richard Douglas compared to the next one.
Yeah.
And incidentally, in hindsight, the other players still did well. It wasn't that they were bad players.
Yeah.
But, and that's what we did.
Going back to my question a bit, recruiting off the character is just as important as talent. If you have two people that are equally as talent, but there's not a better person, but a better fit for the footy club in terms of character.
100%. And then the only other thing that works against that is a healthy belief that in your environment you can bring nearly anyone into it and reform and grow.
Yeah.
And that's a healthy approach as well. So that doesn't make one right or wrong. It just means that I think in the first instance you always try and pick the character.
Yeah.
And then you work as hard as you can to build a culture that will stand up to any poor character behaviours at some point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, very good point. I just want to move on to, the management of footy clubs and senior levels and being in such an industry where it's very cutthroat, right? You're working off winners and losses, and you could have a great culture, at the management level and everything could be running smoothly, but if the boys ain't winning, it would be very, very tough to deal with. So, I guess my question is for you, how hard is it to work in an industry where everything could be going great off field, but the boys could not be performing on field? How hard is it to work in that sort of cutthroat industry, off winning and losing week in, week out?
I think it's a lot harder at AFL level than it is perhaps at SANFL level.
Mm-hmm.
AFL level is incredible. Like it's you ride the wins and losses like you can't believe. It depends on perhaps where you are in that, the clock, meaning that if you're a team that's winning a lot and you're a chance, you ride a season completely different than you do when you're a struggling, perhaps even
in a rebuild phase.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I guess like anything, if you the two extremes, the emotions, it's almost an expectation. So even when you're really bad, you're not going to. Everyone knows we're on a rebuild, so we've got a bit of time to get it right. It's when you've just come out of that, and there's an expectation to be here, and you land there. Well, it's on, and why is it on? It's on purely, and I'll tell you 100% because of media.
I was just about to say that.
It's all about the media.
Yeah.
And it's not any one piece or any one person. It's they jump in, and I think there's 645 registered AFL media people across the nation. They've all got an opinion. They've all got to say something, and 2/3 of those will only follow what the person before them said. So there's a lot in that.
And their ratings are based off saying controversial things as well, right? Like they're going to get more viewers if they say more 100%. Controversial stuff, and then that obviously falls back onto people like yourself at management at footy clubs.
Yeah. If you did journalism and did media study and case studies on things, it would blow you away on how some of these media teams operate. I mean, they call it a war room.
Yeah.
And so they go in there and they plot over the next 6 months. Like they're already writing your headline, and if
it's happened,
if it's a certain thing, all they want to do is keep on it. And then if they form an opinion, they'll keep driving their opinion. So it's a recipe for them to get clicks or sell papers. And
so the perfect bit of example for that is look at Simpson when he's just left over there. One of his points was back to the media. Well, you can't write about me anymore. So
scrubby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's happening is things like podcasts, by the way, as we maturing and we have different options and things, people are picking more about where they want to go and what they think is right. So hopefully someday down the track you don't get just persuaded by a news opinion. So anyway, I don't want to focus on media too much, but that certainly plays a big role in it.
Mm-hmm.
But take all that away. At the end of the day, it's a performance-based industry, and when you come into it, I think if you're really honest with yourself, and you've got to be, if you've been somewhere and it's not working, somewhere in the point, it might be someone else's turn. That's not something by nature that we...
Fresh ideas, they come in and they might change it up, and it might be a fresh way they do it, and people might react differently to it.
Yeah, and the other one is back people in, especially if you're a value-based industry or a value-based organisation and they got the right values, back them in. I mean, support them. Put a time on it, but get in behind them. Don't jump because they lost 3 in a row. Yeah. Now they're no good or whatever, those kind of comparisons end up being. That's false pressure. It's not a true reflection. I use this term, the barman mentality. 2 blokes at a bar talking, they don't even get to like two-dimensional conversation.
It's car park talk.
They don't understand. Like they're not. Yeah, there's so many other elements of things happening that and some of it in clubland you can't share that. That's it's part of your navigating the equations. Yeah.
How hard is it being, or like, is there a difference from being in the management at clubs in Adelaide with less clubs in the city than over in clubs in Melbourne?
Sure.
Like you're under the microscope a lot more with
different,
just 2 teams in Adelaide, right, compared to the 7 or 8 in Melbourne.
Look, the pressure's still there, 100% for all the teams in Melbourne.
But the scrutiny isn't?
Scrutiny isn't.
Yeah.
And it's when you have to be in a certain place for the scrutiny to come. Adelaide or Port Adelaide, West Coast or Fremantle, they've got to find stories about them as well as what's the real stuff.
Yeah.
Because they've got to report on them. It's how it is. The back 4 pages every day is going to be filled with their content.
Yeah, and it's probably not so much in Sydney or Brisbane because they're not AFL states. They're rugby states, but they're probably not under the media as much as the Perth and Adelaide.
Yeah, and I think
would that be correct?
That's exactly correct. And I think each one of them has its own culture too, by the way. Like, they'll tell you about certain newspapers or certain media teams or, radio groups or whatever. They're very critical. They have a style. And so that all plays part in it. My frustration, mate, is purely around when they want to write a story about a player who was late for training from the AFL something, and I've just played against Glenelg and beaten them by 5 goals, and I don't see one article about that. And they want to talk about this other stuff.
They want to talk about the negative stuff because the negative gets more views, right?
So I get frustrated with that side of it. But but being in Adelaide is certainly the fishbowl is certainly a real thing.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking about your time at Hawthorn with the you spent about 3 months there and then had a bit of a medical issue? Yeah. With that medical issue that you had, do you think that was from your workload being too much? And if so, what has that sort of taught you about work-life balance and stuff like that, if that's the case?
Yeah, well, I'll take you back a step first. So I hadn't wanted to go to Melbourne because of my family situation. I had young children, didn't want to really uproot everyone and go there. And I harboured a desire to get there at some point. I wasn't able to do it as a player. And I just like the idea of being in the mecca of footy. It's footy tragic, I suppose. But anyway, so I'd had a few nibbles in the lead up to all of that, and I just really said no. And at this stage, what had happened was when the Western Bulldogs did a review, they come up with this job that was just incredible. When I was reading about that, mate, I said that is by far the best model, and my hat's off to them because that's really going to change the way that clubs do things going forward. Yeah. Little did I know that I was going to end up with a job. Yeah. It just that in itself is kind of remarkable. But so fast forward, Hawthorn are poised to be the group. They just lost the grand final the year before, but they are the team. Like their list is just ready, is ripe, and off field they are incredible club.
Yeah,
you know, I say it like this: 22 million is my budget at Western Bulldogs, of which 11 million is player salaries. So that's 10 million. That's 11 million to put into your footy operations. You know, pay coaches, and all the stuff. Well, if you go to, I went from Western Bulldogs to Hawthorn. That's a $26 million operation.
Yeah.
And these days it's much more than that, of course. But back then, that 26 million is still 11 million for player salaries. You know, that extra 4 million is someone coming. It's like going to the Western Bulldogs and saying, here's a check for $4 million. Go and put that into your footy operations.
Yeah.
It's a
lot of money.
It's a big difference. Yeah, and that was, I found, incredible. I loved that straight away. So the club was as poised to be outstanding, and to its credit, it did do that for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
I walked into the best AFL program I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
I put it at genius level, but in saying that, so this is what I walk into. I'm the GM of footy. I've just got this job. I walk in and the coach is Alistair Clarkson. The director of coaching is Chris Fagan. Sitting alongside him, assistant coach is Adam Simpson, Luke Beveridge, Brenton Bolton, Adam Uze, Big Monty,
who are practically all now head coaches.
2 or 3 of AFL premiership coaches.
Yeah.
So, mate, they had, and then you've got Buddy Franklin.
It's a serious team.
Yeah, you know, Hodgie, just keep going. That group. Yeah, they were
Rioli,
just, so off field, on field, you know, the club was in an amazing place. Now, I've never been in any job where that's like that. I come into jobs that, man, I'm growing them, changing it, fixing it up, or doing something, you know. I came in and, what am I meant to be doing?
Yeah.
You know, it was almost like that. But, yeah, it was a great insight. I loved it. And it was a challenge for me, to be frank. And it wasn't the work. I think what was happening in my own head, I had a lot of things going on, and I think it might have been a build-up of a number of years rather than just anything. Because I literally was in the best, easiest job I was ever going to have in my whole time, getting paid, you know, extraordinarily well. And, so my daughter's 16th birthday, flew back from Melbourne that Friday night. The Friday night we played, Hawthorn played against Carlton. And I tended to, I went home, I'm in Melbourne, I went home, I tend to watch the game again that night because I'm just a bit up. But also as a general manager of footy, what was happening is these days there's always a case of someone colliding.
Yeah.
So, you know, and so I would note them in advance. Sometimes I didn't come to fruition. Sometimes by Monday morning I was ready, already had edits and
just staying ahead of the game,
starting to get in front of it. Yeah, and it's a big deal, some of them. But so I did that. Probably got to bed about 2 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock. Got up at 4:35 to get a plane, 6 o'clock plane home, and we're having a brunch. I'm sitting around the table with family and friends, and Sarah's 16th birthday. I felt like I was about to faint. Now, I'd had a number of these and I didn't do much about it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And but this one came and I'm thinking, I actually feel like I'm really going to faint. No, it's not just going to pass. So I said, you know, hey, I think I might be in trouble. Next minute, I woke up and honestly, I thought I'd just had a little faint. You know how you can, felt like it was like 10 seconds. Like, not even that, 2 seconds. Woke up and there's an ambulance and there's things happening around me and I think, what the hell's happened? And apparently, I'd been bouncing around the room for and it scared everyone. I mean, it's not a great sight, and it scared me too to a degree. And anyway, you know, you think the worst. As it turned out, I just had a small growth in the bottom of my brain.
Yeah,
and I was happy to find out I had a brain. That was the first part. That was the first part. The second part was what are we going to do with it? So yeah, it was out of the movies, mate. I had climbed the ladder to get to this unbelievably amazing gig, and then that had happened, and you know, now I can't drive. They won't let me drive. They won't let me go back to work, in fear that this was going to happen again.
Yeah,
and until they could get on top of it and understand it, and then I got given an objective. an opportunity to either have an operation, which is an 18-month, potentially an 18-month recovery, or I go on a medication and get rid of it that way. But it takes longer, and you don't know if it's working until about 9 or 10 months into it.
Yeah, okay.
So, it was just a life-changing thing. And
Yeah.
and it was tough on more my family, I think, than me at the time, at the immediate part of it. And then the second part came where I was probably lost a bit. And then I turned that around very quickly too.
Yeah.
Mate, it was all about this is an opportunity.
Yep.
So, do you want me to tell you quickly about that?
Yeah, go on. Yep.
All right, so I decided to go to London. Oh, no, not London itself, but I wanted to go. I thought, here's a chance. I'll go overseas and just do a little working experience.
Yeah.
Kids are older,
Yeah,
things.
because you had so you've obviously had a bit of time off after the incident, or
Yeah.
you sort of stepped away from footy?
Well, went to hospital for a week or two. They tricked me. I went back to Melbourne, and then they told me I was going in for my doctor, my club doctor said, I want you to go back for a test today if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'll roll up my wife rolls up and they've got my bags all packed and I was locked,
Yeah.
I think they did that because they knew I wouldn't go. I was stuck there for a week with all these tests and stuff. And look, and in the end, we worked all out what it was, and then I was on a set course, and my mind still wasn't well though. I knew that because what would happen is where I could juggle 55 things at once, mate, I was forgetting my best mate who I could tell you every story about. I couldn't remember his name. It just wasn't
like brain fogness.
I couldn't explain it properly. It was just it was missing a link. Just sometimes really hard to process, and I couldn't work that out. And then, but you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know because I'd still keep talking as if it was normal.
Yeah.
But in my head, I'm going, I can't get his name. What's his name?
Yeah.
So, but then. Bit of medication. My neurologist told me I should try and activate my brain. So anyway, I reinstated my teaching degree because if I go to London, I can get guaranteed work. So I did that 4 days a week. I wanted to work. So I had to get an ancestry visa because I was too old to get a normal visa. Went over, landed in. It was meant to be like temporary teaching, And there's horror stories around it, by the way.
Yeah.
But I was geared up for it. 4 days a week, which meant every weekend I had a long weekend. I could go somewhere and do something. I did it for 3 months. I landed at a secondary school for kids with moderate severe learning difficulty. Mate, greatest thing I've ever done.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. One of the toughest things at times. I did poo duty once. And did many things. I actually won't believe I took a unit on helping these kids with arranged marriages because they're very multicultural. Yeah. Some of them got real difficulties, and there's a whole unit around this stuff. And
isn't that crazy? You went from running an AFL footy club, one of the best AFL footy clubs, to, taking a step back and just being a teacher again.
And I loved it. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think somewhere in it, maybe about 7 or 8 weeks in, the kids, they must have Googled me or something and turned into a celebrity overnight too, because I had photos on Google and stuff for them. And then they got the whole AFL thing, and it was become a real interest for them. But anyway, that was just a brilliant experience. And every second weekend I'd either go to an EPL game or I'd find a cheap flight to Dublin, Paris, Rome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was really cool. Yeah, and so it was just so I did that. A mate of mine asked me if I wanted to get involved in a business that he was starting up. Fast forward, I'm the chairman of that business. It's $1 million a month.
Yeah, nice.
In turning over $1 million a month in the UK, in the United States.
Yeah,
that's not from me. That's from this group of men that are running it now, and they are extraordinary. Yeah, I want you to get one of those boys on your podcast.
Yeah.
I've met some young men that I've just been blown away by their knowledge, work ethic. Big game players, and it's been fantastic. And so that's been good. And then I did some consulting, and then started a law degree. Yeah, which I've got about 6 units to finish, but if I ever do it,
always learning.
Always learning. Yes.
Always learning.
So, and I did that because I wanted to activate the head, and I did an MBA many years before that, and did more law subjects because I was always doing contract stuff. And I was able to get credited for it. So it became a 3-year course instead of a 5-year course. And,
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that going on, and then eventually I decided that I'd go back into footy from an offer from Norwood to take on the CEO's role. And the truth is I was just excited about wanting to give it all back to a club that I loved and started at.
Yeah.
And we're about to embark on a redevelopment. We've done a $15 million redevelopment.
Yeah, it looks great.
We've driven a few other bits since then and upgraded lights and trying to really put some energy into the into the competition through a stadium that's just magnificent.
Yeah,
and
you're also getting results on the field as well.
Yes, we have. Yeah, and that's been great. And I've particularly enjoyed the fact that I think every grade's won a premiership since I've been there, which I've loved. And we lost a grand final in the seniors, and we got it back a couple of years later, and hopefully we're gearing up again. When you've been around long enough, you start to really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
So that just don't happen. I mean, even with the best intention, you just don't always get there. So when you see it, you really want to make sure that you're giving every chance of it now.
Especially from a management level, right? You're watching the whole thing play out. Like you're not just seeing it from a coach's perspective. You're not seeing it from a player's perspective. You're seeing it from an overarching perspective where the club's moving forward. So that'll be very, very, very interesting to sit back and see and witness, and I'm sure it'll be very fulfilling as well.
Well, I realise as a player, there's no bigger feeling than winning a premiership. But when you're in a role that I have, it gets substituted from the load of people that share in the joy in it.
Yeah.
Got to sit back and watch them. That is so good.
Yeah.
And it brings people together, and it's just a fantastic achievement as a collective. Yeah. So I really got excited about doing those things. And but you mentioned something before. I reckon one of the hardest things in my role is you mentioned when the team's not going well, but off-field's going well. I think it's the other way, mate, to be honest, when it's the worst.
Yeah.
It's when things are going well on field, everyone wants all the bad things that are happening, they get swept under the rug. Yeah.
And not get addressed.
You don't get addressed. And that to me is that's when
because things can get worse and worse.
And
they build up.
You can go from being, chocolates to boiled lollies because of that.
Yeah.
So you lose the.
And it can turn quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one for me is where you got to be careful.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't mean you make change for change's sake. That just means you continually review and work on getting better in every part.
Yeah, I just through that book that I read through James Kerr with the All Blacks, one of their mottos is when you're on top of your game, you got to change your game because someone's always after you.
They're after you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I employed a guy that 5 years was the head of conditioning at the All Blacks. Graham, and first guy I ever did a Skype interview. Back in the day, he was heading up the Scottish rugby union, and he had a great story and a very good operator.
Good stuff.
So I like that link there.
Yeah, very good. We're going to jump on to the last couple of questions for you. Sure. Now, this is a question I say every single podcast. It's a favourite part of my podcast because it gets me to see the person that I'm interviewing. It gets me a really good insight into who they used to be and who they are now, and that gives them a bit of reflection as well. So, if you were to get to be able to talk to 18-year-old self, what's one bit of advice you would give yourself about life?
Wow, that's a brilliant question. I think my 18-year-old self, if I was knowing a little bit about myself, I would have said, hey, mate, don't be in too much of a hurry. Enjoy parts of enjoy it along the way. Not that I didn't, but enjoy it more along the way. And perhaps when I say slow down to consolidate some of what you think was right. Then just keep going. Consolidate and know that you're right rather than just keep moving thinking you're right.
Yeah.
There's a couple of those I would offer up.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love asking it because, like I said, it just gives you such a great insight into, and especially someone like yourself that has lived such a, extended and fulfilling life. You've worked overseas. You've got to go to NFL draft camps. You've worked in some of the greatest footy clubs, stuff like that. So, to be able to look back and hear the response to that question as well from someone that's done so much is it's great. It's great, and I love it.
I got to kiss the Prime Minister in her office once.
Oh, yeah.
Not that you'd ever want to kiss the Prime Minister, but not Prime Minister, our what do you call it? Because what happened was Western Bulldogs, we number one ticket holder was the what do you call it? President of Australia. What president?
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister of Australia.
Was that Julia Gillard?
Yeah, Julia was amazing.
Yeah,
and
I met
Western
her.
Bulldogs. Yeah.
I met her at a funeral for a soldier, and then I also met her before I was going overseas.
Amazing lady. She South Australian too,
Yeah.
but she lived in the West, and obviously that was her seat, and she took great interest in our cause, and so we were there for a draft camp. It was her birthday, so Rodney Eade, myself, and Paul Williams went there and brought her a red, white, and blue flower bunch.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a unique experience.
Good stuff. Now, also as well, now that's my previous podcast guest had a question for you, so you're going to have a question for my next guest. And without giving him away, I was in the military with him. He made it to a very, very high performing unit in the 2 Commando Regiment. To get to that unit alone and then go deploy with them is not few many people actually get to do that in their life. It's a really hard selection process and stuff like that. And a really, really smart guy. He did a bit of Muay Thai fighting before the army, and after the military, he's got into a lot of adventure races and climbed some of the highest mountains in the world around Everest and stuff like that. So a real adventure, thrill-seeking, pushes himself to the limit type of guy. So what would be your question to him?
So I was fascinated to, hear this story, and I know that my son had recently done a workout or something with him as well. This thing, and extraordinary individual. But I was the first thing that struck me was the Muay Thai, because knowing a little bit about the involvement of Muay Thai, you have to have a very strong discipline. I was wondering, was the discipline in him to do it, or did he develop some disciplines as a result of it?
Yeah,
that have taken him to that next level. And I'd love to explore that a bit further if I was to sit and have a long chat with him. I think that's where I'd like to focus in on. Yeah.
Well, tune in next week, man. You'll find the answer to it.
Yeah. Well, he sounds like he's got a story to tell, so I definitely will.
Yeah. I'll be heading over to Sydney Thursday night to do that. So I'm looking forward to it. And he's one of my best friends. He was one of the best men at my wedding as well. So it's going to be good, and I'm really looking forward to it. But James Fantasia, mate, thank you very much for coming on to Two Worlds Collide podcast. And mate, hopefully I'll have you back in a year or two.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Hey, Sam, am I allowed to tell the stories about when you're a 13-year-old boy?
Go for it.
And we'd go fishing. I always knew you had what I called the curiosity.
Yep.
100%. I actually would say that I could see a little bit of myself in you when you were a kid.
Yeah.
100%. That's why I loved watching you and Paul. A bit mischievous, but I liked that you were adventurous.
Yes.
Yeah, I went, good. I encourage this.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm so proud of what you've done, mate. You've lived an incredible life already as well for a young man. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And until next time, James.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And for more information, head over to our Instagram at Two Worlds Collide Podcast. Take care.